So this video is going to be how to start out in cybersecurity and 10 fundamental steps. So what I've done is I've got a little script here just so I know every point I'm trying to make and to make it as concise as possible to save you time and not make it a really long video. Right, number one on the list, terminology. You need to understand the terminology you're going to use when you're going into cybersecurity. You need to know what a firewall is, you need to know what ports are, you need to understand what man-in-the-middle attacks are, you need to know what HTTP spoofing is, DNS spoofing, DNS smuggling, you need to know all of these, XSS, SQL injections as well. You need to know literally all of the terminology used and perhaps some methodology as well. For example, like how you would go about exploiting SQL injection attacks. By the way, I have a video on that, so if you want to go check that out, feel free to go do that. Next on the list is GitHub. So GitHub is one of those websites that most software engineers use to do their coding, but you can also use it for cybersecurity as well. You can upload various different files on there that you want to, show to everyone. So for example, on mine, I have basic, Python coding ones. I also have advanced ones. I also have data structures and algorithms. I also have hashing algorithms on there. I also have hash identifier, which is like what stores passwords securely. I also have research papers, I also have documentation, and also have some games on there as well that I've coded up. So it's also really important to make sure you have a GitHub, because that's what employers will look for when you're going for a cybersecurity job. Okay, so the third one would be Linux. Linux is very, very important in cybersecurity. It's what you'll be using on a day-to-day basis. If you don't know what Linux is an open source operating system that's a kernel that allows you to conduct things that you wouldn't normally be able to conduct on Windows machines, for example. So you would be able to check out tons more networking with Linux, whereas Windows would just be for the basic end user. It kind of depends what cybersecurity part you're going into, obviously. This is just cybersecurity in a nutshell. This isn't actually diving in deep. So for example, for a penetration tester, you'd use a lot more Linux than if you was a blue teamer, because if you was a blue teamer, you would be doing threat hunting, for example, which would be using Windows. It is all relevant and subjective. However, this is what I feel you would need to do in order to get a head start in cybersecurity. So yeah, going back to Linux, you can do various things. You can run attacks, so you can do ethical hacking and penetration testing. You can also do various other things with networking, routing, protocols and firewalls. Everything's a lot more simpler in Linux through the command line than, for example, if it was going to be in Windows. Okay, so fourth on the list is very important. It's networking. Networking is very, very crucial. You need to understand that you have the basics of networking in order if you're going to go into cybersecurity, because networking is the main factor. You need to understand how routing's done, how HTTPS is done, how firewalls handle requests. You need to do requests and responses, and you also need to know just generally how it works, as it will definitely give you a head up in security and cybersecurity. Okay, so number five is LinkedIn, right? If you don't know what LinkedIn is, it's basically a social media but for jobs. It is very important that you have one and you use it to your best advantage, because it's very good. Recruiters go on there, right, to find people for jobs. And if you've got all your keywords in, so you know how to do a hacking attack, you do cybersecurity and networking, they can then search for specific keywords, and if they're in your profile, they can then find you and potentially offer you a job interview. It's one of those things that most people have in cybersecurity, and it's definitely crucial to have. Right, so 6, right, this is pretty important as well. Internships. Internships are very important in order to apply your theoretical knowledge that you've learned in school or on your own as self-teaching into the industry, so then you know how to apply it and actually do the job well. There's no point in learning all the theoretical knowledge on advanced SQL injection attacks if you can't apply it into a job, because once you get that job and you're like, I don't know how you do it, then they're going to be like, well, why did we hire you? You need to understand how to apply it into every scenario possible. Obviously, every target and every client is different. However, you need to know how to know the basics of how to do one, and then how to find out what will go wrong if, for example, a client could be vulnerable to an SQL injection attack that wasn't specific to a certain thing. So for example, if you learned it for ID parameters only, right, and they didn't have an ID parameter and they had like a customer parameter or an email parameter, you would need to know that SQL injection could be vulnerable in this parameter instead. So you need to know how to adapt it for every client and possible pen test. Obviously this is penetration testing, but it will definitely help if you're using cybersecurity as well. You need to understand how to apply your knowledge. Number 7, I know this is a bit subjective, but you kind of need good grades. You don't necessarily, but it does definitely help. So some places who do cybersecurity, they sometimes require specific grades in order to do so. So for example, if you had so for internships, they don't necessarily matter. However, some places are a bit picky and they want you to have, like, for example, on track to a 2-1 degree and in a STEM subject, for example, in university. For specific internships, they don't actually mind what you're doing as long as you're pursuing something. So for example, you could be doing A-levels, you could be doing a degree, you could be doing certifications. We'll get onto certifications later on as well, but it's very important that you do get decent grades. You know, like you have to try. It's one of those cybersecurity is one of those industries that you have to try for, and once you've achieved your goal, you need to try again and again until you get to the highest possible level. You can't just get complacent and just sit out, because you will literally be left behind. Right, so number 8 on the list is certifications. Now, they're very important in my eyes. I'm planning on getting a lot more for the summer. So far, I've got the EJPT, which is eLearn Security Junior Penetration Tester. It allows me to become like a certified junior ethical hacker, and I'm planning on getting a lot more, like I've said, this summer. So what they are is they're basically what you could call like mini exams, right, who hold the same weight as, for example, a degree, depending on the ones you get, and they help you boost into the industry because you're actually applying your theoretical knowledge in order to pen test a client or a target as an exam, and then that gets submitted, and if you pass, then you've actually applied your theoretical knowledge into the industry. So number 9, I don't know, it's quite important. You need to understand how it works and basic commands in it, but you don't need to know as much in-depth commands as, for example, with Linux. Obviously, it kind of depends if you're blue teaming or not, but CMD, also known as command prompt. Command prompt is like a Windows little shell thing, like a little terminal, kind of like the Linux terminals, but they're kind of less powerful. It's basically just a place to do like networking, or like running scans, or checking directories and files. It's literally just one of those normal basic networking little features, whereas Linux, you can do a whole lot more, including all of those things I've just mentioned. Okay, so number 10 is just other ideas. So other ideas to consider would be doing interesting projects, also learning a bit of coding maybe, for example, so then that helps boost you up, because in cybersecurity you will be running scripts. You may not necessarily need to know how to code them very efficiently or well, however it does help if you ever need to do that. So for example, if you wanted to automate a pen test role to find SQL, union-based SQL injection attacks, you can do, or to find XSS through writing a script that, for example, could grab XSS payload cheat sheets and then just keeps putting them into different parameters and seeing if there's any features. But as you're coding this tool, you're now not a script kiddie, you're now an advanced user who is using cheat sheets to your advantage. You could also do, for example, research papers. So like I've said before, on my GitHub, and number 2 on the list, I've got research papers on my GitHub. I've got a cross-site request forgery, right? That is a really interesting attack. I highly recommend you go read that. I'll probably plug my GitHub in the description if you ever want to read it. I also have an OSINT, which stands for Open Source Intelligence, right? And that is looking at every piece of publicly available information in order to conduct a penetration test or an attack for an attacker. And that's like quite interesting as well. That's quite a hefty read. That's about I think like 6,000 words. I think it's 6,100. So if you've set aside some time if you want to read it, but it's very interesting. I've heard good reviews from it, so if you want to go read that, go feel free to. And yeah, so that is everything for this video, right? Hopefully you learned something, and hopefully you take this into account and put it into your brain and make sure you actually focus on doing these, because it definitely helps make you more employable in the future. It also helps you boost yourself above other students. Like, I'm in university right now. Everybody I know only does the bare minimum in uni. They do the uni coursework and the tutorials and lectures, and that's pretty much it. If you was to do all of these as well, which is technically what I do as well, then you will boost yourself higher than most applicants that will be applying for jobs when they graduate, which will give you a higher chance of percentage of you being more employable and your employability level. So with that said, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Hopefully you've learned something. If you have, please feel free to smash that subscribe and like button, because I really put a lot of time and effort into these videos, especially editing. You don't often see a lot of the editing because it's behind the scenes, but I do a lot. I spend about 3 or 4 to maybe 5 hours editing each video, which is why it takes me about a month or so. But I'll try to pump out more videos now, And in a few videos time, or maybe the next video, I'm going to be discussing what's actually going to be happening with this YouTube channel. So stay tuned for that. And anyway guys, I'll see you in the next video.